final session of the conference, which will be presented by Alessandro Moura, an Azure MVP who has traveled all the way from New Zealand. His experience includes organizing and speaking at the various meetups and local events, webinars, etc. We are glad to have him ready to introduce you to the best practices for the deploying Azure integration services. Welcome, Alessandro.
Hello. Oh, yeah, cool. Well, first of all, thanks, Kovai, for allowing me to do a presentation on this conference. I've been always like one of the attendees, watching and listening for the experts on the field, and it's like my pleasure and my honor to be here presenting today. Well, as you guys saw, my name is Alessandro. I work as integration platform lead for Fisher and Paykel in New Zealand. And a few things about me. So the first thing, as you can see from the picture on the bottom, I'm a very die-hard fan for Corinthians Paulista, which is of course a Brazilian football team. So whenever I have a chance, I go to a stadium to watch. Of course, I live in New Zealand, so I can do that anymore. But this picture I took from a match between Corinthians and Chelsea, so in 2012, for the World Cup for teams. So if there's Chelsea fans, I'm sorry, we won the championship. The other thing about me, I was born in São Paulo, Brazil, lived there for a long time, and then moved to New Zealand. There are a few pictures to represent New Zealand. So the first picture on the top, hopefully you guys know what that is about. And the second one is a picture from a place called Cape Reinga, which shows signs with distance for several parts of the planet. There's one that talks about London that says about 18,000 kilometers. So that's the difference between, the distance between New Zealand and here. And yes, I do integration stuff, and this is my first international speaking gig that I'm doing. I did like a few meetups in New Zealand, so hopefully that's gonna go well for me today. Okay, so in the agenda today, I'll be talking pretty much about DevOps. And the funny thing is, I'm not the first. We saw several sessions about people talking about DevOps, how we can develop the solutions. Of course, we all want to know like the best way for developing solutions, but we need to be able to deliver those solutions in our environments, being a development environment, test environment, production environment. We need to be able to be consistent across, everything that we do. And at the end of the day, we need to make our life easier, not difficult. So that's the main goal of this session. So just a little bit about DevOps in general, and then I'm gonna go, hopefully, deep dive to talk how to deploy Azure integration services resources. So that's the main focus of this session today. Okay, so this is like DevOps in general. What is DevOps? There's like several definitions. So we can start like DevOps being development and operations together. We're going to have our infrastructure as a code. DevOps is automation. So whenever we talk about DevOps, we are taking whatever we developed and we are publishing those things to our environments. And normally DevOps is not just a technology thing, it's not just a tool, it's a culture. It's something that we need to take as a principle in our companies. There's a quote from Donovan Brown from Microsoft that says that DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to end users. And like at Matthias' session, he mentioned something about being agile. Like when we try to be agile, we need to be agile, but providing value to our customers. And DevOps is gonna allow us to achieve that. A little bit more about DevOps. So this is normally like what we are going to be looking when we talk about DevOps. So we need to separate in how we do development, how we do testing, how we deploy those solutions across the several environments. And at the end of the day, we also need to monitor our solutions. What I'm gonna cover is those areas. So for development, just pretty much like the code we develop, a little bit about unit tests. I'm not cover that much. I'm going to mention a few things that we can do. I'm going to mention a few other things that we can do better. Most of the time I'll be talking like about deployment and a little bit also about monitoring of the solution. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we had Samuel session talking about logic apps and API connections, DevOps. We had Matthias session talking about how to do the deployment of solutions. We had a Michael session talking about logic apps standard testing. So all those sessions, we also had like the session from Toon talking a little bit about APIM. So all those sessions, they are related to DevOps. And that shows what is the concern or what we are looking for when we are looking for Microsoft to provide ways of doing that. You know, to do the development with all the amazing tools they provide to us, but also how can we be consistent to deploy those solutions across several environments. So the first thing I'm going to mention is I'll be talking about deployment with Bicep. So I know we saw some presentations with ARM templates and a few mentions about Terraform. So my tool of choice is Bicep. So that's what I use. It's more simple to work with. I guess the size of the documents that we generate is a lot smaller. And the idea of using Bicep is to allow for simplicity. So to allow the developers to make the deployments that we need to be done, but I guess in a more simple way. So ARM is great. ARM has been there for quite some time, but it's big and it's complex. And it's a little bit difficult to work with. Bicep is like smaller, it's more simple. We can just specify methods and properties, and we achieve the same results in a more simple manner. The other thing about working with modules in general, so I'm talking about Bicep, but could be like ARM or anything else. Whenever we work like with modules, or whenever we work with templates, we are looking for consistency. So it doesn't matter if I deploy to service bus or a storage account, whatever I'm deploying, if I'm using a module that was developed by my team, by my company, I'm aiming to always reach the same result. It can be like because I have to deploy a storage account and I need to enable TLS 1.2, for example. So those standards, they are going to be there. Of course, that's not enough. As mentioned by, I think Tum mentioned the usage of Azure policies. So we can have like those two work in conjunction. But for the modules itself, we can specify like a bunch of properties that all my resources need to follow. So that's a very good standard and practice we can follow. When we work with modules, we can work, I guess, in a few ways. So we can simply do a repository checkout. So point to the repository one is going to download everything, those modules inside your pipeline, so you can work with the development. You can publish and then download that code later using artifacts, or you can even use Bicep registry in Azure containers, I think. So those pretty much like how we do. So all the demos that I did, I'm trying to use the module as much as I can. DevOps is good, it's not so easy. I had to backtrack a little bit of the things that I had in mind. And I'm going to show you the list of failures that I have while trying to build those demos. But I guess like we all faced those same issues before. Okay, so when we do deployment of resource, let's start again. So when we develop an integration solution in Azure, it's going to contain a bunch of things. So you say, oh, I'm going to work with logic apps, or I'm going to work with functions, or whatever you want to work with, you need a bunch of other things. You need probably a storage account, you need Key Vault for sure, application sites, you need to set up service plans. All those things need to be done in your deployments. So what I'm showing here is like we are going to have like at least 2 resource groups. One for what we call like the shared infrastructure, shared services, or whatever you want to name. So in that resource group, we're going to have everything that is going to be shared across all the work that we are going to do. And we are going to have resource groups that are specific for a particular solution. So in this example here on the screen, I'm talking about a sales order process where I need API to receive the request from external systems. I'm using Service Bus to publish that message in a topic. I have a logic apps capturing that message through subscriptions, and I have like a support function app to do some other communication with some other APIs. Okay, so normally I'm going to split what is related to my infrastructure is going to be in one resource group. What is related with my solution is going to be in another resource group. And another thing that we do as well, so those names you see on the APIs, Process API and System API, is not by chance. It's like intended to be like that, because we normally define that the Process API is going to be, the coordination of the work that I need to do, like to call several APIs. System API, they are very related to what we call a system of records. So if I need to call a order management system, if I need to call an inventory system, if I need to call an ERP system, normally we're going to have APIs tied to those systems. Okay? Together with the organization of the resource groups, so we're going to have like those several resource groups in terms of the shared infrastructure as well as the solutions. We also need to define how we are going to maintain those in the source control. There's, by the way, like there's no, I guess, right or wrong answer, but the way we do is we have one repository for each solution, each thing that we want to do, right? So for the shared infrastructure, we are going to have a single repository for that. I don't share the repository with other things. For the bicep modules and for the YAML templates, I have a specific repository for that, so I can capture everything that was developed in there, and I publish that as a single artifact to my DevOps. What else? Each integration solution that we call, sales order is one example. We are going to have one repository handling everything that is related to that. And if we have like a reusable objects, reusable things that we do in our solution, I'll have a single repository for that as well. So that allows me flexibility, that is going to allow me for agility. So if I want to change the system API that handles ERP, I can do that in isolation without changing anything else. I should be able to do that particular work. Of course, we need a pipeline to handle specifically that. So we try to separate, like separation of concerns, I guess we could call, to make sure that each repository have like a single intention, and we have a pipeline handling everything that is related to that. Again, for the repository, for the shared infrastructure, storage account, service bus, key vault, service plan, anything that is going to be shared. For the solution, we're going to have like components that are specific to that, all the logic apps, all the functions, everything that I need to, pretty much the code that I need to do. But also, we have, if that particular solution requires a topic in Service Bus or a subscription, that code, that bicep code is going to be inside that repository as well. So whenever I need to deploy the sales order solution, I'm going to deploy everything that I need, even if I have to use like a shared infrastructure. And of course, like the reusable components, which can be like utilities, functions, or API definitions. So we are going to have like one repository for each one of those. And the other thing we need to think is about how we use branch definitions and a branch strategy to tie with my deployments. Because I need to deploy to dev, I need to deploy to test, to pre-production, UAT, whatever you call, and we need to deploy in production as well. So how from where you're taking the source code to make those deployments. So the way we do is like this. So by the way, this is like a Git flow structure. I hope you guys know what is that about. And this is how we do. So this is the diagram that we use to define how we do that at Fisher and Paykel, which means everything that we do on feature branches, as soon as we commit the code, they publish to develop. if we merge those changes through a pull request after a pull review, after a peer review, that change goes to tests. And whenever we merge that to main, goes to the pre-production environment and the production environment as well. So our pipelines, they detect where the change came from which branch the change came from. So we define where we are publishing our changes. So that's pretty much how we do there. And that's a little bit of the controls we do. So in dev, pretty much whatever the code, whatever the code came from, we are going to deploy to dev. If the code came from develop or main, or any of the feature branches as well, we also deploy on test. But to deploy in pre-production and production, which is, oh yeah, it's right, we need that to come from main. So that's how we do. We are changing that approach a little bit to be a little bit more aligned to the Git flow. So in Git flow structure, if I go back just a little bit, we have those numbers here, which are releases, right? So we are going to change our structure a little bit to also use releases instead of just working directly with the main branch. Cool. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the one thing that I mentioned before, like we have all the shared infrastructure, all the things that I need to do to create like those shared things, but everything that is related to a particular solution is going to be embedded in that repository for that solution. It can be queues, topics, subscriptions, filters for service bus, permissions on key vault. So let's say that I need to deploy my logic apps that is going to consume an API, and I need a secret in there somewhere to tie those up. I'm going to make the publish of those secrets right away to key vault. And the goal at the end of the day is like automate everything. We are trying to avoid any manual intervention in the code after we do the deployment. So that's the main goal. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes the backlog doesn't allow us to do that. But at the end of the day, that is what we are looking for. Another mention about storage accounts. Storage accounts, we pay for the amount of data. We don't pay for the account itself. So normally we're going to have like storage accounts that is going to be tied to the service plans, one for logic apps, one for functions. And if the solution requires like files, storage somewhere, we have a storage account specifically for that solution as well, okay? Which is going to be, of course, in that resource group. When we deploy API management is one of the resources that takes like, I guess, the longest time to deploy across all the services in Azure. So when we want to make deployments of those things, we are trying to be, I don't know, a little bit smart or save time. So we use Git hash to know exactly what has changed. So in our deployments, after we are doing the deployment, we capture, I guess, the Git hash, and we store that in a variable in DevOps. And the next time it runs, we do a comparison, and we know exactly what has changed. That's the only thing that is going to be deployed. So if I have like, I don't know, 30 APIs, and I know that I changed just one, I'm going to just pick that single one and make a deployment of that particular API. We don't deploy everything. So that allows us to be a little bit quicker. That came like because the company is not using anymore, the free tier from DevOps, which create kind of a queue. So we try to be a little bit more smarter to make sure the deployment is like as fast as possible. The other thing we do, as I mentioned in the beginning, for the API policies for a particular API, we have a repository specifically for that. So if I switch here a little bit, so we have this definition of the ERP system API, and in that definition, I have the policies for each one of my operations. So this is all related to the operations that I want to deploy. Then I have the Open API specification as well. So again, if I'm doing the deployment and only this create order has changed. That's the only thing that I want to deploy. I don't want to deploy anything else, as well as for the other things. So that's about the API management. To show so this code here on the bottom, it's about how we do API instrumentation of our solutions, right? So how do I know which operation was executed when, and we need to be able to search on the application sites all the requests that came through. So we use this, and I think we use this based on the blog post that he did like some time ago. But pretty much we know, okay, if I have a request for a particular sales order, that sales order is going to be passed as a context ID. We're going to capture that information, and whenever I want to search that up, I just go to application sites, I put the order number, and I can find everything related to requests made to that sales order process. So this one here on the top is showing like a little bit of the open API definition. The other thing we do as well, related or not to DevOps, the other thing we do as well is like naming conventions for everything. And one naming convention that we have, and we try to follow very strictly, I guess, it's how you name your path for your APIs. So follow the REST, we try to follow the REST definitions. So, having the name of the resource we want to handle, like sales order, and if we want to do a query, it's going to be through get. If we want to do a change, it's going to be through put, and so on and so forth. So we try to follow that very closely, and the peer review process we have in place allow us to capture anything that the developer didn't, did properly. It allows for organization and know exactly what you have in your environment. We use PowerShell to do the deployment of the APIs. So all those files that I showed before, instead of having to deploy everything at once, we pick those files that change it, and we apply those changes whenever we are needing. If it's like a new API version set, if a new API, a new policy, we use PowerShell to help us do the development instead of doing everything every single time. And this is a little bit how you see the definition. So if you see here on the API definition for this one, we have creation of this thing called address book, payment, a sales order, and this is important to us. So if we are using post and we say a sales order, it means that we are doing an insertion of a new record for a sales order. So that's what we want to achieve. Normally that works well for every single method except the get. For the get method, sometimes that's not possible because my input that I need to have to do a search, it's not going to fit in the query string. So for that, we have a particular definition that allows us to use post, but with the intention of doing a query in the database. We just have a definition for the name of the URL we are going to have. But anyway, so this is like more about the naming conventions we use. The rest of the definition here, as you can see, the responses, the objects that we exchange, it's all defined in the OpenAPI definition. So that's important to us to make sure that whenever the developer goes to the developer portal, they can see exactly what we want to in terms of what you are going to pass of information and what you're going to receive back, and of course the possible response that we have in terms of 200, 400, and any other response that we are going to have coming from there. We need to parameterize the deployments, of course, and to parameterize we have a few options, right? We could use parameter files from JSON parameter files for the bicep modules. We can use DevOps libraries and variables. We can use bicep variables as well. We use a mix of them depending like what we want to do. For the example of the Git hash, because we need to have like a store that information for the next execution. We use DevOps libraries. Pretty much the rest is going to be done through the parameter files. Okay? When we are going to deploy function apps and logic apps, and I'm talking about logic apps standard, we need to define how we are going to do that deployment. And most of the time it's going to be one single logic app service plan in the shared infrastructure, one single function app service plan in the, also in the shared infrastructure. Those guys you see here, the logic apps with its workflows, the function app with its functions, they are going to live like in its own repository, and the pipeline for that's going to deploy on the shared infrastructure. There will be times that we need to have our own service plan, and if that's the case, that repository, that deployment that we are doing is going to take care of the service plan and the logic app. So it depends like the load, it depends like the volume of the transactions. If everything works well under a single service plan, that's what we're going to use because it's cheaper, of course. If that doesn't work well, we need to have like a second service plan to handle the load of that particular logic apps. So Wagner did a very good post, I think about a month and a half ago, how to split. So we used to have like this structure for forever, I guess, with function apps. He just did like a very good post about how to do that with logic apps standard. If you guys haven't seen, you should check that out because that's pretty much what I'm showing here on this diagram. Yeah, this is just an explanation of what we do. Important thing is like whenever we are doing the deployment, we need to be able to test the solution. So the session that Michael did was exactly about that for logic apps standard. So I did like all this development, I did all the logic apps, the workflows, the maps, schemas, how I'm going to be able to test that. So the work he did together with, I guess, his teammates was really, really good, but it's a lot of effort. So that's one thing, and that we heard from Microsoft that they are working like on a better DevOps experience, and yeah, looking very much forward to how that's going to look like, because ideally we just want to make sure that we have the logic apps and we are able to test the behaviors of that logic apps to whatever we want to develop. Okay, yeah, just a few notes. We should be able to do two things with every single piece of code we do. Unit tests and integration tests. Those are two different things. Unit tests, we are testing that particular piece of code we developed. If I have a schema, I want to make sure the schema is following the definition that I did. If I have a map and I pass an input and I know what I want to be the output, I want to test just that piece. If I have a logic apps that receive data coming from service bus, SFTP, whatever it might be, I want to be able to test just that particular piece. So that's the kind of experience that we don't have yet. So that's what, I guess, that's what I'm looking for. Hopefully that's what you guys are looking for as well. The integration test is pretty much making the communication end-to-end. So I have an API exposed through logic apps, and that API is going to insert data in Dynamics. For example, whenever I make the call to the API, I need to be able that this happens all the way through to the Dynamics. So probably I need to have some way of checking that the data happen in Dynamics as well. Few notes. Unit testing functions, C# at least, is easy. So we just develop the solution to be testable, which means we are using dependency injection. We use frameworks to help us out, XUnit, mock, whatever we want to use. We are able to say, okay, I have this function, and I'm able to inject some code, some data to test that particular solution, that particular scenario that I want to use for that method. There's no way to do that unless you go through what Michael mentioned in his presentation. So to do the same kind of behavior in logic apps, it's a lot of effort. So again, so that's, I guess, is what we are looking for, better solutions. Integration testing, like because I'm just testing the integration, I just need to insert the file in the SFTP. I just need to send a message to service bus. I just need to generate a record in Dynamics, whatever you're going to do, and make sure the execution happens end to end. I guess it's a little bit easier. The unit test is the complicated bit that we don't have yet. And as I mentioned in the beginning, like all the things that I do to be able to search, I have another slide. All the things that I do, because I'm using Logic Apps Standard, I'm using functions, I'm using like all the Azure resources, and they are all tied up to the same application sites, I'm able to have a correlation end to end. So I know that like when that request was done in the process API, that passed through like a bunch of things. And I'm showing here just two API operations, but it could be anything. It could be a logic app in the middle. It could be a service bus, send a message to service bus. It could be that I'm receiving the message in another logic app to retrieve that information. So the application sites shows the tracking end to end. And this is pretty much out of the box. You don't have to do anything. What I do extra, as I show in the policy, is to insert new informations in the trace for each APIM execution, for each logic app that I have. So I add extra information to allow me to find that operation easily. So if I receive the request, and that request was provided in the header from the order management system with the order ID, I just type the order ID, and I can find everything related to that particular execution. Okay? So that's, I guess, the goal, right? Be able to monitor and to track easily our solutions. So just to show a little bit the pain from today. So this is, let's start with the modules. So this is my repository to handle all the modules and all the YAML templates. So if I want to deploy, let's go with API M, right? So the developer, they need to pass to me just the name he wants for the API M, the email, and the environment. But the definition of the SKU that he's going to use is not exposed. And that's like, that's intended, that's how I want. So if you are working with a developer environment, that's the tier you're going to have for that, which is the developer in this case. If I want to save money, I'm going to share like maybe it's a little bit small. How do I zoom? I don't know how to zoom in Teams. Huh? Control plus. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, I was using the wheel from the mouse. Okay. So if I want to save a little bit of money, I'm using developer across all my environments, which is like dev, test, and pre-production. And of course, production, I'm not going to do that. I shouldn't, at least. You guys shouldn't do that as well. So that's why in production I have like a different SKU that I'm using. Okay. So if I want to have like a kind of a consistency across my environments and like not allow the developer does whatever he wants to do, we can say, okay, you can only deploy through this module, and the module is going to contain a few, I guess, restrictions. Again, that's not enough because you can simple override this, so you need to have like the Azure policies to make sure that this is actually happening. And we have like the many other resources. So I have like one module for APIM, I have a module for application sites, for defining an access policy in Key Vault, the Key Vault itself, and so on and so forth. And I have also the YAML templates that are using that. So in this, let me switch to this one. So in the deploy shared services one, so every time that I want to deploy something, so let's go to the top. So every time I want to deploy a storage account, I'm pointing to that particular module that I have. And because I have specific properties that I need to set as parameters, I'm using this parameters file. So if you guys look here, I have this parameter file. Okay. So in these deployment steps, I'm doing everything that I have to do in terms of key vault, storage account, service bus, everything that I need to do as shared services. And if I look to my pre-executions, so we have this execution that happened an hour more or less ago. And it was succeeded in development and in test. I don't know what's going with APIM. APIM is taking more than 1 hour today to be deployed. And because I'm using the free tier, it is timing out. Okay, so in this particular execution, the issue was Azure. But if you guys look what I did today, the same issue, I guess, as before, right? So to make things right in DevOps takes time. It took a little bit of time to me as well. That's because I deleted a few things. If we look for the modules, I think I have this somewhere. I had to deploy many, many times the modules to make sure this is working well. And you are going to see a little bit of complaints while I'm doing that. Okay, that's the one, test 2. Oh my God, please work, something like that. Okay, that's, I guess, DevOps. What else? For the function execution, for the pipeline of the function, so this is what is happening there. It's stopped in testing because I don't want to do the deployment in test. I think like that just shows what I want to achieve. But I have the capability of doing the build of the solution because it's like a C# code. So I do the build, I do the test, and if everything is right, I publish the bicep files, and I use those same files to deploy the code in my environment. So if I look here, so first, like the execution of the shared infrastructure generated this. So all the resources that I need, and the deployment of the function app did this. So I have, I think it's 2 functions. No, I think, yeah, it's just 1 function, but I was able to do the deployment after my unit test was executed. If I go back here, because I have tests tied up with this pipeline, I should be able to look that everything worked as intended. So I have only 2 tests, but that proves that my solutions work. Of course, you need to make sure that your tests cover your code as much as you can. Okay. And I think I need to switch a little bit. So I was talking about how do I do the validation of like what exactly changed. So that's pretty much what we do. So we have the first the validation of the branch to make sure that I'm deploying the right environment, and I'm just deploying the things that I want to do. In this case, is trying to deploy a new API definition. I'm only going to deploy the API definition if my Git hash is different. If it's the same Git hash, it means it's the same code, so I'm not going to be bothered doing the deployment of that particular API, which is going to allow me to be faster. So that's how we control that definition. we have a few PowerShell scripts that allow us to do that. First is the one that does the, I guess, comparison of the Git hash. And we have a second PowerShell that updates that variable with the Git hash. So we can do the comparison. So that allows us to be, I guess, a little bit faster. And this is actually like the DevOps repo of the company that I work for. So you're going to see that these three things here happened after I left for the conference. So I hopefully the developers did a good job. I need to still do the peer review of that, but this is the one that went all the way to production. So I have the control exactly where that was developed, what was deployed, based on all my branch controls that I have. One last thing, because I'm pretty sure you guys are tired and want to go home. So this is a little bit of how we do things. So you're going to see that we have the templates in those two repositories. We have each code for each API definition on its own, which is going to allow us to be, I guess, faster. If it's something bigger, for example, the sales order, not this one, this is still a POC thing. So for this one, whenever I want to deploy that particular solution, I have APIs definitions, I have logic caps. So that's going to be all contained in my repositories. So this is actually like these API connections. And inside of these deployments, I also have the code for topics, subscriptions, filters, whatever I need related to service bus, storage accounts, and so on and so forth. So this is pretty much, I guess, what I have to share with you guys today. I hope that was valuable. So the good thing to take from this, let me go back to the takeaways. The good thing about what we saw happening in this conference is was not just one person talking about DevOps. Even though I wanted to be the only one, I was not. A lot of people talk about that. And this is a very important concern for us. We need to be able to be, I guess, consistent whenever we are deploying. So the other day, because we are still setting up a few things in my company, we had to deploy one thing manually, and of course it failed. So we deployed that. So we deployed everything that we had so far doing automation. Perfect, because we thought about everything up front. We tested that in the pre-production environment, worked everything fine. One API, one single API that we had to do many steps, that's the one that failed, because we forgot something, of course. Okay, so I guess the goal is automate everything. It means the creation of the shared infrastructure. It means the creation of your code, logic caps, functions, whatever you are doing. It means setting up the permissions up front. If you need to create a secret in Key Vault, if you need to set a permission for a managed identity connection, whatever it might be. So all of those things you are able to do deployment through Bicep today. So try to do the automation of everything. Use Bicep modules to bring consistency and policies alignment with your company's definitions. One thing that I forgot to mention, templates to facilitate the developer life. So as you guys saw, DevOps is not so easy. So what we try to do is something like this. Sorry, let me switch to this one. So these are all the steps that I need to do for deploying the function app, which means, sorry, let's go to the top, which means building the .NET project, executing the unit tests, creating the bars, creating and publishing the Bicep artifacts. Then we go to the dev stage to deploy that particular thing, tests, and so on and so forth. My goal for the developers is to have a much more simple way of doing that, which is this. So ideally, in my in my scenario is developer, use that template, pass whatever parameters you want to pass, and it's going to take everything for the deployment of all the environments that I have in my company. So that's what we want for. So we have that done today for function app. That's why you're seeing that. We need to do the same for the other things right now, okay? With all the things that I mentioned, like with the Git hash validation and all the other things that I mentioned before. So it's going to be much more simple for the developer to say, okay, so this is the piece of code that I need to do to make a deployment across the environments for my function that I just developed. Use stage to represent the environments you have, whatever, how many environments you may have, of course. Only deploy the resources you change it, and align your branch strategy to define which kind of code you're going to deploy. And this is a journey of constant improvement, and that's true. You're going to keep changing that over and over again, because today you found some way of doing this, tomorrow is going to come some other new ways. For example, we are just discussing this outside of working in the future, probably in the near future, with GitHub Actions, but not just that, but like anything else that happens in Azure DevOps may have you want to change to follow that new approach, that better approach. Okay? So that's what I have for you guys today. I hope that was somehow valuable. I know it's 3 p.m., so I'm finished like 3 p.m. sharp. And thank you again for coming to the conference, and happy to be here, and thank you for that.
Covey.co